Did you know that behind this rubble on Wetland Aspect, there are some hidden Easter eggs? These and the hidden Easter egg islands in A Moment Fractured are fairly well known, innocent little secrets hidden by the devs. But what about the maps themselves? If you take a break from the chaos of your run and look at your surroundings, you'll find a lot of interesting little details. These have no impact on your gameplay, but I still find them so interesting. Hi, I'm Socks, or maybe you're hallucinating. No one would believe you anyways. And I invite you to come with me as we look into the various interesting details that you might have missed in the various environments we all know and love. Before we get into this, I want to say that this video is inspired by Moreover's videos on Apex Legends maps. I really enjoyed them and will leave a link to their channel in the description below. Our journey begins in the sweeping sands of the abandoned aqueduct. Among the dunes and pools of tar, you can find these pressure plates that, when pressed at the same time, open the titular abandoned aqueduct. Most of you know this already, but within these ducts, two elder Lemurians have made this place their home. Most people would kill them for their bans and leave without a second thought, but one thing I think is interesting here is a small pile of opened chests on the ground. Within the aqueduct, the overwhelming lack of aqua definitely entails that the monsters that reside here have found alternative ways to get water. Food is taken care of with the other monsters, but since there isn't much water around, these chests imply that the Lemurian couple has resorted to foraging from the chests left behind by the UES contact light. There's only 4 chests, which actually makes a lot of sense. Looking at the item pool the chests have to offer, only a few of them could actually provide some amount of sustenance. Now, obviously we have no real proof of this, but the fact that the Lemurians here are shown to scavenge, whether for survival or just out of greed, makes the world feel a lot more alive to me. These monsters are not just mindless beasts trying to kill us, but instead, at least for the most part, they're just trying to survive, just like we are. Zooming out, you can notice that there is a sort of makeshift moat that surrounds the entire map. These may be naturally dried up river basins from the water that used to be here, but due to the various bridges that reach across them, I think that these may have been man, or rather monster, made. The entire dam and aqueduct system itself is clearly not natural, so it brings up thoughts of what lived here and what it looked like before we showed up. The position of the tar fall implies that this exact system was designed to both block out the massive water source that assumedly used to be on the other side of the dam, while also providing the residents of the canyon with a plentiful and reliable water source. Pouring it into this central location makes it easily accessible, and the moat was likely created so that everyone could have access to the civilization's water supply. The vast majority of the environments in this game contain some amount of ruins left by a now extinct species. But with this environment in particular, we don't just get to see that something lived here, but partially how they lived as well. Another small thing I want to talk about here are the red banners hanging off the various skeletons around the map. I'd like to think that these were left here so that any wayward travelers in the hostile environment outside the canyon could see that there was sanctuary here. This same theory applies to the ropes and banners lining the border of the environment where the natural walls and dam couldn't. These being placed here, likely after the tar began to invade the environment, implies to me that those who lived here placed them as a visible reminder of where is safe and where isn't. This attention to detail is just so interesting to me, and it isn't the only example. That's why I'm making a whole video about it. Stepping out of the hopeless, dry wastes of the abandoned aqueduct, we bring our study to the impact site of the shattered abodes. Along the edge of the map, there are 3 buildings that, inside, contain these small trinkets hanging from the ceilings. Something lived here, and due to the disaster that evicted them from their homes, these small reminders of who they were have been left behind. A physical chance doll can be found in another shelter as well, a children's toy left behind as the family escaped the rubble. In the post-loop variant of this map, Disturbed Impact, we can see that something has since moved into this rubble and began to rebuild. Hanging light fixtures have been placed around the map, More of these trinkets have been hung outside the entrance to the reformed altar, and in one of the previously mentioned buildings, we can find the door has since been opened, and there are a few broken Lemurian eggs inside. Also here is another chance doll, implying that the Lemurians may have found one and gave it to their child as entertainment or comfort. There will always be a large chest in this room as well, supporting that Lemurian scavenging theory we previously covered. Another detail here that's so simple, but one I am absolutely just enthralled with, is that on Shattered Abodes, it is raining, and in Disturbed Impact, it is no longer raining, and instead there are a few shallow pools of water in the lower elevation parts of the map. This specific tiny bit of detail just makes me so overwhelmingly happy in a way I cannot explain. The fact that the map designers took the time to take the rain of the previous map into account is just so cool to me. From the warm, almost hopeful environment of the Shattered Abodes, we leave to a much more depressing part of the planet, Rally Point Delta. What was at first a survivor camp designed as a makeshift refuge from the horrors of the planet soon turned into a hopeless island prison for the survivors left there. What's interesting is that throughout a lot of the game, you don't see a lot of human remains. There are the dead commandos on commencement, which are a fun little detail by themselves because there's nothing to eat them there. But other than that, it's assumed that anyone who died eventually had their remains eaten by a monster or simply taken by the weather. That's why I find it so interesting that inside of one of the open shipping containers on this map, you can find two skeletons lying next to each other. Their identities are unknown, including their cause of death. Maybe one of them is the Malik Dillon that recorded the logbook entry for this map, but due to how much this environment has been broken down by time, we may never know. This map does communicate to us, though, that at least at one time in the history of this place, the survivors did have a fighting chance. The various light sources around the map still illuminate the environment to no one's benefit. Bridges, fences, defensive outposts, and most notably the two large signal towers that seem to still be active show us that there was a pretty great attempt at survival, however hopeless as it was. I'm no engineer, but these towers seem to have pylons similar to the 5G towers we have in real life. What are either speakerphones to sound an alarm or radar scanners to receive external signals, and lights at the top of them made red to contrast the overwhelmingly white palette of the environment. These likely served three purposes: to help extend any calls for help the survivors sent out, to monitor and receive signals from passing ships, and to rally and organize the survivors that resided there. It's likely that the red lights on top of them would still be visible even during the densest of blizzards, which would both help lost survivors find their way to shelter, but also help any rescue ships find the shelter themselves. Overall, this map is just so interesting to me, with how it's one of the only maps that shows how the survivors of the contact light actually lived and what might have happened to them. I only hope that future maps have more personality to them, rather than just being random areas of the planet. For those of you who don't know, the Path of the Colossus maps are not the only environments that were shelters made by Providence to protect the various species living there. Ailion Sanctuary is also an, albeit abandoned, place of solace from the horrors the planet had to offer. The thing I like most about this map is how none of it is really explained. There's no reasoning for the floating platforms and pillars, the light sources are unexplained as well, and there is no clear reason as to where all the residents have gone. One thing that is clear is that they most certainly worshipped Providence here. In a moment fractured, the obelisk we can see is made by Mithrix, as is revealed by the logbook entry. So it's intriguing to me that the obelisks on Ailion Sanctuary are upside-down versions of the one in that hidden realm. It's like the followers of Providence saw the wrath his brother had and chose to take his symbol and turn it into their own. These are all theories, of course, as is this whole video, but these obelisks seem to have some sort of power within them. With the obelisk in A Moment Fractured being a sort of teleporter with a key, that being the Beads of Fealty, it makes me wonder that, if we had the right key, these obelisks might take us somewhere as well. I want to step back a bit and talk about how interesting I find how the devs went about adding light sources into the game. On some maps, this isn't necessary, with the sun doing that job just fine. But in others, light has come from somewhere else, and the creative ways the devs went about this just fascinates me. We have the previously mentioned light posts set up on Rally Point Delta, crystals in both the Reformed Altar and Abyssal Depths, various bioluminescent flora on the Abyssal Depths, these little spore things on Distant Roost, the fungus and lights on the wreckage of Viscus Falls, and whatever is in the water here also seems to glow as well. Siphoned Forest has these fire pits and hanging lanterns, the pits of fire and lanterns in the Bazaar Between Time, and like every plant on Sundered Grove. The list goes on, but I just wanted to highlight how the developers could have just gone with just having the maps be well lit with no explanation, but instead put in the extra effort to make the light make sense. Returning to the lush forest of the Viscus Falls, we can find that since we were here last, a cave has opened up below our feet. Remember how we studied the area to see how the creatures that resided here may have lived? A similar story happens here as well. Within this cave, we can not only find that someone has built a makeshift shelter and campfire, but also they have managed to put up a scaffolding made from wreckage outside. The way the various scrap metal here doesn't feel random like it does on the surface, but instead feels almost clean, just makes it feel all the much more real. Looking at things like how barrels have been repurposed as benches here implies an actual survival situation here that could have been completely neglected. I also want to talk about the electrical wires strung up on the ceiling. They don't seem to draw or deliver power from or to anywhere, so I just find it a little confusing as to why they're even here. I suppose it's only fair to point out the details that don't make a ton of sense in this game as well. Nobody's perfect. I want to move away from the planet for a moment to talk about the moon for a little bit. Commencement is one of the maps that actually has rain on it, but unlike Shattered Abodes, there is no post-loop alternative for this map to gain any puddles. But the rain does, in fact, go somewhere. Looking over the edge, you can actually see that below the environment there is a pretty massive reservoir of water. Maybe this was well-known information, but I only just found this out. Using FreeCam, we can see that there seems to be a layer of fog above the actual water line, which I find really interesting. There's no real explanation for this, but I just think it's cool how much detail is put into a part of the map which you'll likely never see in a normal game. What I also like about this map is how you can see the various prototypes of the lunar chimera lying around it. In the lore, these monsters were made by Mithrix instead of just being natural beings on this planet, so here we can actually see where they were made. You can also see the workbenches and workshop tools Mithrix used, including an anvil, a type of kiln, a mold, these hanging chains with adjustable claws, and more. Also, there are multiple of Mithrix's other prototype weapons lying around. We can finally imagine what a Mithrix fight would look like if he had a sword, an axe, a much smaller hammer, or what looks to be the makings of a massive cleaver. Maybe a future DLC could have this. A girl can dream. But these aren't the only prototype weapons around Petrichor 5. If we go from one brother's home to the other, we can find a prototype of Providence's sword at the top of Helmet's hatchery. Maybe this isn't a prototype, but instead the real thing, broken since we killed him in the first game. Also up here is a pot of spilled healing fruits, and the same trinkets we found in the buildings of a disturbed impact. The healing fruits are really interesting to me, just because of how they make the items we find on our runs actually make diegetic sense in the world. Not just a random alien fruit, but a piece of the world that was actually used by the denizens who lived here. We can also find some lava worm eggs here, which I just find adorable, since this is, after all, their birthplace. The massive worm corpse on the map is, in fact, a single body that is likely one of the gilded worms that fought with Providence in the first game. The second worm's corpse can also be seen in the out-of-bounds area, but there is significantly less of it. The final detail I want to talk about is how the four maps that make up the Path of the Colossus are actually visually connected to each other. Inside the temple at the Shattered Abodes, there is the cave entrance to the Reformed altar. The feet of the massive Providence statue are on the Reformed altar. The Prime Meridian and Providence statue can be seen from Treeborn Colony, and Treeborn Colony can be seen below the Prime Meridian. I am simply obsessed with this. Every other map feels generally separated from all the rest, being its own little part of the planet. For some, this makes sense, like how Siren's Call is just in the middle of nowhere, but the fact the devs went the extra mile to connect these maps is just so cool to me. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. There are a multitude of details I missed, so if you'd like me to make a second episode, do let me know about that in the comments below. What are the details you like about this game? I want to hear all about them. If you did enjoy the video, I would really appreciate if you subscribed, and remember to check out Moreover's videos in the description below. I also want to thank the Grove Tender for helping me with the sweeping shots in the background footage. Thank you to our members for supporting the channel like they do, and thank you again for watching. Bye-bye.